Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Trong. I'm a senior risk and field security engineer here at GitLab, and I am the DRI for the Security Operational Risk Management Program. Today, I have with me Julia Lake, who's the Director of Security Assurance, and we're going to talk about what risk management looks like at GitLab and give a brief introduction to risk management. Julia, I'm going to toss it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Steve. So at GitLab, we subscribe to a three-tier hierarchical approach to risk management built on NIST and ISO standards. Tier 1 risks are organizational or enterprise level risks. Tier 2 risks are at the operational or business process level. And Tier 3 risks are at the information system level.
Gotcha. Can you dig in a little bit and give some examples of the risks that we see in those different risk tier buckets?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with tier 1 risks, which are the risks that are at the top of our risk pyramid, an example of a tier 1 risk would be something like company A will fail to comply with applicable laws, regulations, and standards, something that would be organization wide and organization impacting. Tier 2 risks can come from really any business process, but usually come from security and IT risks, privacy, financial/fraud risks, or supply chain risk assessments. An example of a tier 2 risk would be something like company A's IT organization does not have a central team for managing user access, making access removal activities difficult to action and audit. And then finally, tier 3 risks are generally one-offs, not always, but they're generally one-offs and the result of just doing business, daily activities. Things like vulnerabilities, product issues, and audit findings generally fall into this category. And a literal example of a tier 3 risk would be something like company A's compliance team identified a terminated team member who didn't have their access removed within 24 hours, and then they take quick remediation against that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for providing some tangible and real world examples. So I want to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly, because what it sounds like at the end of the day is there's really a relationship between these different tiers or different levels of risk. So we might have a handful of tier 3 information system granular level risks that end up supporting a tier 2 operational risk because we're seeing some common risk themes. And then at the end of the day, those tier 2 or operational level risks could impact a tier 1 or that broader organization level or enterprise level risk.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So all layers of risks are interrelated, and having a robust risk program at any organization is incredibly important to facilitate risk-based strategic decision making. So ongoing risk assessments at all three tiers are used to identify, estimate, and prioritize risk across the organization. That being said, Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about our annual security risk assessment process?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of the Security Operational Risk Management Program, we call it the STORM program for short, we execute an annual risk assessment process where we proactively work to identify risks by engaging and interviewing key team members across the org. Based on the conversations and risks identified through those interviews, we perform some risk triage activities where we're really just applying a dedicated and objective risk methodology, assessing if a risk identified is within GitLab's appetite for risk, and what's the likelihood that the risk will occur, and what's the impact to the organization if that risk occurs. At the end of the day, risks outside of our risk appetite end up going through a risk treatment process where we document risk treatment plans to make sure that we can remediate and reduce that level of risk.
Awesome. So obviously at GitLab, security is everyone's responsibility, not just the security group's responsibility. So what should team members do if they think they have a risk that might qualify for our program?
Definitely. So I'd say anytime that team members come across something that could be a potential risk or they think could be a risk, a potential risk, anything, they should definitely communicate and get that onto our radar so we can apply that risk triage and make sure that there's no security specific impact, since that's what our program focuses on. The preferred method is to leverage the security risk management Slack channel using the risk escalation workflow in that channel, which will ask team members to provide some high level data on the potential risks that they want to communicate our way. Based on the information we get, we will make sure to confirm with team members that we've received the info, and if we need to do any additional conversations just to clarify some of the data they provided, we'll go ahead and work with them for that. But ultimately, yeah, we'll do the triage based on things that make it to our radar, and then work through our risk assessment process. On our Storm handbook page, team members can also find alternative communication mechanisms if they don't want to use Slack to communicate risk details to us.
Awesome. Thanks for that overview, Steve. Thanks for setting up this call. Hope it was insightful for everybody listening. And if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of us.